But whenever he did the inspection, I asked him, okay, well, you did this, what's next? And he said, well, you're going to lose at the appeal board, and then your recourse is to take us to district court until you go broke, because we're going to make sure that's what happens. But it's just sad to me because if you pay for your property in your home and you pay for it, or a lot of people don't even realize they're paying such high amount in taxes because they think they're paying down a mortgage, and then all of a sudden they say, "Oh God, I never owned it to begin with. I have to continue to pay rent to live in this place, and then if I don't pay, the government is going to remove me by force." And that's extraordinarily unfortunate for a so-called free country, because that's not freedom at all.
America, land of the free, home of the brave. But imagine for a moment an America without a First Amendment. I'm speaking today not only of the freedom of speech and of the press, but of religion. Religious freedom is at the foundation of America's founding itself, going all the way back to the Pilgrims at Plymouth Rock. How long would it take to erode religious freedom in 21st century America? What would the early stages of it look like? How would those losses of freedom in religious practice adversely affect our families as well as future generations of Americans? Today's guest is Kevin Schmidt, a resident of Texas who converted his organic farm and wedding facility into a weekly oasis for fellowship and worship. Kevin's unorthodox regimen of spirituality, philosophy, and religious history are intersected by the rugged and spacious outdoors of his organic farm. Many in his congregation are veterans seeking to outgrow PTSD by engaging in post-traumatic growth in a healthy and grounded way. The federal and state government have honored Kevin's tax-exempt status, but his county government has seen fit and decided to infringe upon his inalienable rights as a human being. This is very un-American. Kevin's here to raise awareness of your rights, as well as a call to action against the restrictions in religious freedom. What's happening in Texas is likely also happening in your part of America. All right, Kevin, when did you start your farm and how did it evolve into a religious entity?
We started construction out here in the bare piney woods of East Texas about 12 or so years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. And we operated as a family organic farm for a whole number of years. And about 6 years ago, is maybe a little bit more than that now, we began, just a few of us every Sunday, getting together, and that evolved into a pretty substantial spiritual practice with a lot of wonderful people coming out all the time from all over the world, actually.
Well, I've seen in the past your expansive greenhouses, and the way you had set up your property was one of the most professional operations I had ever seen. How did that organic farm operation, how did it evolve into the religious entity? Was it people coming by every week and saying, hey, we like this thing we do on Sundays, in the midst of all this other stuff? But I'm just trying to figure out how you shifted gears, because there's a lot of people out there looking for options, and also they're looking for sometimes tax breaks and how they structure and tax plan around properties and things like this. So how did that evolution happen for you? Was it an outside causal factor? Was it an internal creative factor?
Well, my mother and I were partners in the farm, and we were going to just build a few cabins for us to come out here occasionally. We really wanted a place that we could make to be self-sufficient for our family and learn how to grow good, clean food. And in that process, we ended up traveling the world trying to figure out how to do it right, because I didn't know how to grow anything. And we discovered aquaponics. We went on this journey of learning, and we built a really substantial greenhouse, our first one, and it was just so much fun. And I really began to learn just the whole blueprint, the divine blueprint of life, and that our food, doesn't come from Walmart, and that it just became such a every moment out here was a spiritual event. And I personally, went through a very dark period, had some personal tragedies, and for a number of years I was really in a state of depression, and I stopped all farming. I just quit. I didn't feel like seeing anybody. I didn't feel like growing anything. I didn't want to hear anything positive. And I was fortunate enough to have a couple of friends that started coming over on Sundays, and they kind of nicknamed it documentary Sundays, because we would sit around and watch different topics and discuss philosophy and those sorts of things. And it didn't take long for more and more people to find that a interesting and fun thing to do. And it didn't take long either for us to start delving into our inner selves. We are the reasons for most of our own problems. And being in nature here, we really sat outside and grounded a lot and began meditating in the fields, and it started to become very spiritual. And then as more and more people started to get involved with that, I felt more obligated to start exploring all of the tools available to us individually to start just becoming better people and connecting to each other and to the infinite. And so I started to feel this pleasurable obligation to have presentations, to start doing interviews. And as that started growing, it completely began to interfere with our previous work here. I had already stopped farming, but we would occasionally have weddings still at that time. And then I stopped that too because there was a problem with our Sundays. And Sundays became a very important part of my life because it forced me to think about issues within myself and larger than myself that I probably would not have done on my own on a consistent basis every week, all week long. And I formalized it. And I said, well, I'm going to open this up to the public. We have some cabins. People come from all over to stay here for free. It's turned into this beautiful, wonderful place.
Well, I've also, over the years seen your YouTube channel with you and your brother and special guests reading into Bible verses. And I think it's both educational and entertaining because some of the things in there don't fit very well with modern day world. And it's kind of ironic. And there's discussion of definitions and juxtapositions and contradistinctions and all these other high-minded, highfalutin type things that go on in a nice library setting with some people who are investing their time to better know themselves, better know where they came from, where they're going, these sort of things. I think these are all healthy activities and they should be conducted regularly.
Yeah, I agree.
I
I
mean,
think that's one of the things that the infinite has given us is the ability to critically think and to ask ourselves questions and to dive into uh, a myriad of other topics so that we can become better people.
now, when did you apply for the religious exemption under Texas law?
It was approximately about 4 years ago, something like that, plus or minus a little bit.
And from my understanding,
We were,
Go ahead.
well, we were going for a couple of years without me doing that until we got a little bit larger. And I thought, okay, I probably need to do that.
Right, things keep going on consistently. You're like, I might have to file paperwork now because it's becoming a thing. That's a good sign. That's a sign of growth. That's a very American thing. So you went to the federal government, to my understanding, and the state government, and they said, have at it. You have religious freedom. Good luck. So where's the snag?
Well, the snag was with Harrison County, and we're in Texas. And Harrison County, Texas said at first, me and my attorney went to them, and let me back up just a hair. From that time we first went to them until now, there have been three chief appraisers, which is the head of the tax office, the property tax office.
Yeah, it's always an interesting position. Did we elect the tax assessor? Is that something I
No,
missed?
no,
All right.
no, we don't.
They have an awful lot of say in our lives as far as freedom goes. That's why I'm saying maybe we should all become more interested in how that works.
Yeah. Well, we went and we sat with him and let him know what we were doing. And he said he could not deny us. In fact, he was extraordinarily condescending. And he began to tell us about his church experience and his every Sunday and started to talk about his religious beliefs and what his preacher says. And he said, well, I cannot deny you, even if you were out there worshiping snakes, because it was obvious he didn't fully understand what we were doing, because it's basically a Unitarian type religious facility. We think that there's no exact one path to get to enlightenment or self-actualization or self-realization and to connect. And he didn't really like any part of that. So he was being condescending whenever he said, you can worship snakes and I still cannot deny you. Because he already knew what we were doing. And, the word had already been out and spread around this small area. I don't know if he thought we were a bunch of hippies sitting around under a tree or, I have no idea what he thought. All he had to do was watch some of our videos and he'd probably get a quick gist, and that probably aggravated him.
Well, the creation is usually outside the stained glass windows of those buildings where they make you watch the one person's perspective at the front. I bet if you took a poll across all Christians in North America and you had a detailed description of what Christianity is, I bet none of them answer the same on the test because everybody has little nuances and little differences in what they think, right? And when we get down to arguing who has the accurate magic scroll, like I think we've lost the essence of what it means to be a human being in the 21st century and to learn to live our lives, respect other people's freedoms and beliefs and all these other things, but we also have to be, in a position to adjudicate and draw the line and say, look, this is where my freedom begins and your freedom doesn't come over here to interfere with my freedom. Likewise, right? It's a win-win type of game. It's not a zero-sum game. So when people come into it and they want to make it a win-lose zero-sum game, then, you have to think more asymmetrically, I think.
I think you're right. And he fully did not understand the whole concept of one of the things that we practice here is we just have a few cows. We keep between 5 and 7. And one of our practices is to constantly thank those cows because we eat them almost every Sunday. And we do have our greenhouse. So our regular people that come out will grow their own food. And me and a couple of the guys that really enjoy working in there, we tend it, and everybody gets food abundance. Like we truly show people firsthand that come out that, hey, you can have food abundance. You can have food security and understand that divine blueprint and take care of your physical temple, that houses your consciousness. And so you take care of yourself. And that kind of went over his head. But he still said, well, if you worship snakes.
Well, initially the county approves your religious exemption and then comes back and withdraws it. How does that was I understanding that part of your case as like that's the triggering event? Everything was fine when they recognized your rights until they came back and said, I'm sorry, you can't have this exemption. We don't recognize your rights.
That is right. About a week and a half or 2 weeks later, after me and my attorney were in his office, we were under the strong impression that everything was fine until we got that letter. And it was just a 1-sentence letter. And it basically said, you are hereby denied your religious exemptions. It was just that cut and dry. There was no explanation. My attorney did call and ask him why that was the case. And his response, the chief appraiser's response, was that somebody had been out here once and they called him and said that they were offended and that they were offended. And
so I'm a little confused. First off, I got 3 incredulities right away.
Right.
Somebody from a government in the United States of America, in the state of Texas, for Harrison County, someone wrote a declarative sentence stating that they have the power to deny you your religious rights to practice as you believe.
That's right.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating that they would write a declarative sentence on a piece of paper with letterhead and send that off. That's just, I would say that's exhibit 1. And
it
then
was pretty shocking.
Yes. And then to claim that they have the right to give these types of rights out. Like I'm confused about their chain of authority in the whole matter.
Yeah, and I was shocked that his response was that somebody was offended, which I had no idea what he was talking about. I've never met anybody that came out here and was offended. And if they were offended by anything, getting free food or learning the divine blueprint of life, if that was offensive to you, I can't help you with that, but I can't imagine.
Was that person's name provided to you? Because
no,
making such statements to deny other people their human rights, let alone American rights, I don't know. Is this the Stasi or Gulag era where we have anonymous people making claims against us without evidence? Is this Kafka? I mean, my hat is not a joke. Make Orwell fiction again. I mean, what you're describing is pretty Orwellian, even in an America of the 21st century that we occupy presently.
Yeah, I found it
fascinating.
Really, really disturbing because my first thought was when my attorney had expressed what the chief appraiser said, I thought, man, I know people all over the place that get offended all the time going to their church, or they switch churches, or they do this and that. I mean, are you going to deny all of them? Like, that was my first initial reaction before I realized the fight ahead of us.
I mean, what does the First Amendment mean? It means the right for other people to say things that I don't want to hear, and that's their right. Likewise, I get that right. So if I went to someone's church and I didn't like what I heard, I would have the freedom to leave, and it's not their responsibility to change their mouth sounds or their words.
That's right. But he also did not tell us who it was, and there was no evidence that there was ever a phone call.
That seems a little shady. Now,
And I can imagine anybody.
Could you subpoena public records to find out if there was a phone call, in fact?
Yeah, we're getting to the point of discovery now.
All right, good. Because they always want to play the war of attrition because they're a governmental entity and they got deep pockets and long lives because they're a governmental entity. And people come in and out of there. And they want you to give up in the face of that. And that's also un-American. To deny you your rights and then to bully you and say, basically, we're going to make you go broke. Because every corporate whistleblower I've ever heard, including myself, they tell you that in the room before you go to court. Well, you can win, you can appeal. You're never going to see justice because we have deep pockets. How much of your life do you want to spend like this?
Well, that's exactly what they said here. When the second chief appraiser, he had to come do a physical inspection before you go to the they make a ruling, and if you want to appeal that ruling, you have to appeal it to them. You don't get to go to an outside board or a non-biased, non-partial appellate system. You have to go before them. So you're going to your abuser to stop the abuse. And part of the rule of that is that he had to do a physical inspection. So him and one of his staff members, they came out. I showed them all around. I showed them where we did or where we do all the things, and there was no dispute. He said many times that there and in public hearing that we are a religious organization and we do the things that we say we're doing. And he knows that firsthand because he used to sit in our driveway and watch and people come in, which was a very intimidating factor to a lot of our congregation. And, we lost some of them because they thought, oh God, well, is something else going on? Because why else would the government official sit out here? But whenever he did the inspection, I asked him, okay, well, you did this, what's next? And he said, well, you're going to lose at the appeal board. And then your recourse is to take us to district court until you go broke, because we're going to make sure that's what happens. And that was an opening thing. I mean, it was just me and one of our regulars was standing right beside me, and me and him looked at each other like, did we just hear that right? I mean, me and him were just baffled for, how, we're just two guys. And so, of course, we had to talk about it for like an hour after he left, scratching our heads. What the heck was that? And
I mean, I don't know. Maybe Harrison County is the center of the universe, and I missed that day in school. But it sounds like, I don't know, something out of a movie where small town corruption, small county corruption, this sort of thing goes on where no one checks it. And that leaves you as a person who could, you're at risk by going up against that type of authority that's not serving your rights. So shouldn't you just capitulate your rights, give up, submit to the bully, and maybe get home without losing your lunch money?
I mean, we've already spent a substantial amount of money on attorneys, and it has been very costly. It's been very not only inconvenient, it's a tax on our time, on our resources, and it's prevented us from doing all sorts of things. We've had in the works another bigger meditation center. Because we have our cabins here, they just stay full. People come here for free. We don't charge them anything. If they want to help out, fine, but we don't ask them to. And we're going to build some more in our meditation center years ago, and we haven't been able to do any of that, and which has been really, really horrible. Instead of our money is going to expand the work that we do, we've had to use it to fight them. And that's exactly what they wanted to happen. But consequently, the second chief appraiser who came out and told me that my recourse was, basically to go broke, was not too long ago, 6, 7, 8 months ago, something like that. He was forced to resign because tax officials in Harrison County Tax Office brought suit against him for falsely raising people's appraised value on their property, targeted direct people that he did not like. And he had several women in the tax office also file suit for sexual harassment. And those guys, I mean, he didn't have a choice. He had to leave because they had all the goods on him. And I wasn't surprised because I saw his character. And
How long ago was that?
that was about 6 to 8 months ago, maybe
So
nine.
that wasn't that long ago. That was the culture there
Yes,
at the place that's shaking you down.
that's exactly right.
That's
Exactly
fascinating.
the culture. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, but
interesting.
I wasn't shocked at that. It just felt, of course, after you deal with them and you see it. And whenever we did go to the appeal, which is the appeal before them, which was recorded, and we recorded it ourselves. And I think it was 8 or 9 times that he actually said we were a religious organization doing what we said we were going to do. And so while he kept continuing to say that, I guess I naively believed that, okay, well, the board is going to, they can't help but, grant, not even grant, allow us our religious rights. And like, they can't deny that because,
Right. Because they're referring to you as an organization that has religious rights.
right.
So
And
their affirmation of your identification throughout gave you the courage to be like, oh, and maybe the confidence to think that they were going to allow your rights to prevail.
yeah, I got kind of lighthearted in the thing. I was like, okay, well, this is going to work out all right. And I went in there thinking this is a disaster. And then as it was going, I was like, okay, this board sees what we're doing, and he's recognizing it himself. And then, of course, they came immediately back and said no.
Well, that's interesting because these people work in government, right? And they're in Harrison County and they're in the state of Texas. Texas law recognizes religious organizations under Texas Tax Code Statute 11.20. Have they given you any legal basis to deny your
No,
rights
none.
despite this law?
Zero,
Okay.
zero legal basis. They did come to us after the second chief appraiser. He was gone. He resigned. They hired a new guy. And this new guy, he also sent some people out here. He did not come himself, so I have not met this guy, and he's been there since the other one was forced into retirement. He's not retirement, but forced to resign. So they come out with their attorneys and with their head people. And I thought it went amazingly well because they continue to say the culture there has changed. They're not part of that same group anymore. All these repetitious sort of things. And they kept congratulating me because we've had a lot of veterans here. We have a lot of veterans that come here and they find a lot of peace of mind and peace of heart and real connection here. And
Well, you have a friend of mine who's a former Navy SEAL that goes there. So that's
yeah,
one of the veterans.
yeah, and he just left yesterday, and he comes all the time from all over the place. And he just called me and say, "Hey, I'm coming," and stays for a week or two. I would say 70% of everybody that comes here are veterans. And
So the assessor, in a tangent, is denying some veterans access to post-traumatic growth opportunities.
oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely, because we also have regulars that are licensed therapists and really do fantastic meditations with them and have it's just a beautiful experience. And to deny us that ability to service them and help them, is a tragedy.
There's two other pieces of Texas legislation that might help us as we get to the adjudication. Under Texas Open Meetings Act, that's TOMA, and Texas's Public Information Act, do you believe that the tax assessor's office has violated the transparency that they're obligated to?
Yeah, they were supposed to many weeks ago. We gave them a list. There's some type of procedure that at this stage of the legal battle, it's kind of like a mini discovery. And so in that process, we had our list of things, and we have continuously asked, for those things, and they have not. And my attorney actually told me today that he was just pushing forward because for many weeks now, we've tried to get a trial date. They keep pushing us off. Every single thing is just ignore, push off, forcing me to incur more costs by talking with my attorneys to get them to push. And they did send us a counter. Well, not a counter. We sent them a counter. They sent us an offer to settle. and they said that we were 50% spiritual. They said
How did
providing,
they arrive at that? Can I see the calculation?
yeah,
Because not
that's
for
one of the
nothing, dude,
things.
but I've litigated against multi-billion-dollar law firms, against the multi-billion-dollar company, and what they're doing right now is like penny ante type stuff. And I don't see how they're getting away with it because anybody who knows anything about law, you got properties and property damage, and you got contracts, you got torts and contracts.
Right.
They are so far out of the field that we're getting into territory where I don't know. Go
Yeah,
ahead, please.
you're exactly right. And I couldn't help but just smile. I mean, I'm a natural smiler, but it just comes very, very natural for me. And so I just started laughing when I saw it. I was like, I cannot believe this. How are you 50% spiritual? So they said they wanted to give us 50% of our rights. And I was like, but that just doesn't fly. And they said that our part of the reason, well, they said our cabins are not for spiritual use, which is that's just
I
absolutely
would like to see their
insane.
definition of spiritual. I have Black's Law Dictionary. I have a whole bunch of other dictionaries right over here. Which one do you want to use to define spiritual? Because I'm guaranteeing it's not going to match what's in the dictionary. It's not in legalese. They're not going to, you're talking the difference between the Bible and Black's Law Dictionary or Nexus Lexis. Like those two things are not really congruent, and to be compared, they're apples and oranges, but both were created by a creator, I would assume. All right, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, please.
Well, it's a pretty common practice, especially in the fall and spring and much of the summer, for us to get together regularly during the week or especially on Saturdays. And we'll sit around a nice little campfire that we have in the field, and we'll eat some of our fresh beef out here, and we'll have these fantastic meditations and just really great fellowship. And because we are in a remote location, it makes it where we can provide that service, because everybody, at 10 o'clock, 10:30, when everybody is ready to go to bed, everybody has a place to stay. And everybody that stays in those cabins, they're 2 and 3 bedrooms, and when they're in there, they're recounting their stories. We go in there and talk, and our licensed therapists go in there and visit with them. And all of those things are just an integral part of what we do. And whenever they said that didn't apply, I just told my attorneys, I said, well, we're just going to counter back and let them know that it does apply, because that is what we're doing. And they know it's what we do. And they did say, well, you got a big chunk of land, but we have about 100 acres, but we weren't asking for all of that. Like, for instance, my house sits right here on the property. Well, I had it carved out as a separate piece of property, a separate 2 acre property, because I did not want my personal house to be involved in this at all. I didn't want them to come back and say, oh, well, you're trying to get a tax exemption for yourself and your residence, which is totally legal and happens everywhere all across the state and the nation. But I didn't want that to be part of the fight. So I pay taxes on my house, and I wasn't asking to not pay taxes. I was like, but I am asking to exercise my religious rights for what we are doing. And
That's what you get for trying to do it right. So what you could
yeah,
do is go back, claim your house, and take their 50% deal, and then you'd actually have what you want without the litigation.
well, no, because we're asking for one of the things they said. Well, this field in the back is not being used, but it is being used because we use it for walking meditations.
Yeah,
But
open space, fresh air. These are things that human beings need. And I'm sorry that the bureaucrat on the other end, like forgets that feeling of being a human being sometimes, maybe. I
well,
don't know.
what they
Like it just seems like that person is trying to justify their job by taking away your freedom.
Right. Well, what they also did have for all of these years now have prevented us from building the other buildings that I mentioned earlier. And because, we can't go out and build those things if we are under the threat of the suppression. We cannot go out there and spend those monies to do that. But Texas law allows, and there's case law with this that's been confirmed through the courts, that if you're planning on construction on your property, then they have to grant that within a 5-year period. Well, we would have done this years ago, but instead we're using those funds to fight oppression, for them to deny us entirely. And so that's whenever we sent them several months ago the counter back that said, no, we're not, that's not it. And it's not right. I mean, they know it's not right. So now
Well,
we find ourselves in this position where they said, well, I guess we're going to court. And then now they don't want to give us any of the information we asked for. They said, yeah, we'll set a trial date, and they keep putting that off, not wanting to set a date. And now our attorneys are just going to do it without them, which is going to be a much larger bill and burden.
Well, you've done enough martial arts in your life to know that when someone's trying to put a choke on you and make you pass out, that you have to at least put up some resistance and try to liberate yourself and get your rights back. Because, I think it was Henry Ward Beecher in the Proverbs from Plymouth Pulpit, apropos to this conversation. Liberty is a soul's right to breathe, and when the laws are girded too tight, liberty becomes a syncope, not a syncope. It becomes a syncope. That's passing out. It faints. It passes out. The laws are girded too tight, and they are restricting your freedoms. They're restricting your religious organization's right to grow and add and provide benefits to your congregation, many of whom are veterans who could use what the government can't provide to them.
Oh, that's a fact. And similarly here, because we're in Texas, and Texas is famous for cowboys and horse riding and rodeos, there are cowboy churches all over Texas with massive amounts of land and cows and bulls and everything else that go into their church, and they're totally, absolutely fine. But us, on the other hand, because we don't worship exactly how they want, they find that, seems to me, they find it offensive.
It's very un-American.
Very un-American, that's for sure.
They want you to rebrand. Get it? It's a cow joke. All right. So aside from like going and changing your format to what they're telling you to do, I mean, this is like, there's plenty of other countries in the world that work like that. This is not one of them. And if you let them start dictating what you can religiously worship and practice and meditate on and all this sort of other stuff, then what the founding fathers fought for is all in vain. And what they fought for at the Alamo is also all in vain. When these types of things, like, because this is not someone who's elected to office to have power over your life. They're not sworn in to have an official place of office. Are they swearing an oath to the Constitution to be an appraiser? I have yet to chat GPT that, but I suspect probably not. Otherwise, they wouldn't act like they can't be held accountable and have something to lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's not their money. It's not their personal money they're spending on the legal fees, which are quite substantial for the county. And now everybody else has to pay for their legal fees to fight us from servicing the county.
Well, and I can only imagine if that's going on in Harrison County in Texas. It's going on in a lot of places in this country where other people don't have the representation or the active literacy skills to get out there and talk to and warn the other people who are probably under similar losses in First Amendment freedom.
Yeah, we were very fortunate that we had enough resources to put up a fight.
Well, you are a very well-accomplished real estate investor and all the other things that you're into out there. The fact that I mean, it's not so much a sacrifice to you, but most people would see taking an organic farm like that, shuttering it and turning it into a place of meditation and worship and spirituality and letting people stay at the cabins for free. And you're not trying to Airbnb stuff, like all the things that you've done show good intention, ethics, and morality. And I think that just is a stark contrast to the way a lot of these other organizations are run in this country. And that's why they're like, hey, you can't do it like that. You have to come over here and do it like us, where we're doing it all 50-50. Because we have the right to tell you how much religious, spiritual freedom you have. What if they want to change that 50-50 to 60-40 or 90-10 one day? Like, what's their limit? What's their boundary?
None. I mean, they can do it at a whim. And it's really sad. And what you just said about, the things that we do out here, one of my favorite days out of the year is pruning day. So we have this fruit tree orchard that, I don't know, it has not very many, but about 100 or so, 150 maybe, fruit trees, apples, peaches, pears, nectarines, and all of our regulars, and then other people that don't come very often. They all come out here. We have a fantastic day of course, we feed everybody every Sunday. And so we're outside pruning the trees, taking care of them, and showcasing to all these kids that are there the beauty of life. Like, this is where our sustenance comes from. And this is how we house the temple of our being. And so whenever it comes around to harvest, everybody gets it for free. Yeah. And whatever's left over, we give to anybody that's in need. But normally we don't have much left over because everybody loves it and they want it.
Yeah. I mean, There's other people doing similar things like Jim Gale in Florida with food forest abundance, but it's not under religious exemption and it's not like a spiritual thing. It's just like a human being food thing, right?
Right.
What you've done to bridge that gap, because there is a need for people to have wide open spaces and some low pressure away from urban sprawl and the Wi-Fi and all that stuff to recover their human beingness. And that
Yes.
is why we have a religious right in the first place, to have that clear spiritual connection to that which brought us into this world. And for someone who's also a human being, just like you, right, acting as a master and then you're the slave, that is not equality. And that's not what this country was founded upon. And that's not what carries this country into the future. What happens in these legal endeavors if they don't side with you, and what type of assistance are you looking for as you move forward?
It's a great question because I think the best thing that could happen would be some type of public awareness where people actually either wrote letters, called, emailed, uh, to start putting public pressure on them to do what's right. I think that is the only thing that is going to help. I've written so many public officials and with no response. I was very pleasantly surprised to get a return response just a few hours ago from the one of the guys that worked for the deputy Attorney General of the United States. They responded to our letter. I don't send letters just regular mail. I send them in a big old package where they have to open it up and see. It's not like it's gonna go into the mail stack. They're gonna get it. And so of course, it explained everything and a lot of the legal documents that have been going on so far. And they were very intrigued. And I'll be surprised if I don't hear something. I'm not holding my breath for any assistance, but that was a good sign that they felt compelled to not just give a cursory reach out. It was a pretty good reach out. So hopefully that does something. But more importantly, just to be in front of as many people as possible to hopefully the humanity inside others that hear and know of the story actually become keyboard warriors and send emails and make a phone call, or that alone would make such a dramatic difference because they don't want the pressure on them. They don't want public awareness on what they're doing. Even if their hearts are truly dark, which they appear to be, but they don't want light shined upon that. They would rather just, hey, go away, go do your thing.
They definitely don't want you calling the general counsel for the governor of Texas and speaking about denial of human and religious rights going on in his state, with the triggering event being a certain Harrison County appraiser who decided to take the law into his own hands and rewrite American history and jurisprudence.
Yeah, well, this was the federal attorney general's office that
I know, yeah. So it
yeah,
goes even higher than the governor of Texas. I'm
yeah.
just saying, like,
I,
that's
I
the,
wrote to all those people and haven't got a response. So,
well, it all trickles down from the Fed. So
well, we'll see what happens. But more importantly, and once again, we just need everybody possible that read that this story resonates with to just type something up to them. Hey, this is wrong.
well, I want to encourage the audience that, these little actions of support for other people's endeavors, they do make a difference. And I'll tell a little anecdote story real quick to illustrate my point. Once upon a time, one of my mentors, John Taylor Gatto, was recovering from a stroke. He was convalescing at his apartment in New York City, and his wife, Janet, had a stroke, and she was taken by ambulance to the hospital. So John is at the apartment with his 24-hour-a-day caretaker. His name was Dorr. And Dorr calls my wife, Lisa, and says, there's a group of people here trying to kidnap John and take him out of here. Now, between the building owner, who John and Janet won their apartment in a lottery contest in the 1970s and had rent control, and it was a huge, like, 4-bedroom, but it was kind of dilapidated by that time because it had been a long time since the 70s and hadn't been renovated. But it was a big space. And if you're the landlord of that building, you want that on the market and get your money for it, right?
Yeah.
Likewise, there are guardian services run by private religious entities in New York. I'm not going to out them right here, but let's just say they make money from jacking elderly people who have wealth and resources and things to take, and they deep six them so they can't talk to anybody. So this guardian service had teamed up with the landlord, and they got word as soon as they knew that he was in the apartment by himself. They waited for the care guy Dorg to go down to the bodega. So now they know John's in the apartment for 5 minutes by himself. They burst in, they try to do that. Door comes back in. He sees what's going on. And there's an ambulance guy, like a paramedic there. So Door calls my wife. My wife says, let me talk to the paramedic. Well, she feeds him a whole lot of words and he ends up hanging up on her. But it went something like this. That man is a world renowned published author. He is cared for and loved by many, many people. If you take him out of that apartment, I guarantee your name ends up in the human rights lawsuit. At which point the ambulance guy does what he's trained. He's not trained to take harassment calls or any type of threats, right? He hangs up the phone and continues dealing with John. Door calls back a couple minutes later and says they left. The ambulance guy said he was fine to stay here and wouldn't participate after what Lisa said. So then they came back and they tried again, right? So my wife called the mayor's office for New York City and got into like the general counsel, which is the lawyer team, right? And said the right words, and it was going someplace, and she was getting a call back. But then she said, why not call the attorney general? So she calls the New York State attorney general. She says, here's the triggering event, and she lists in legal speak, here's what's going on. She got a call back right away. And they said, what would you like? And she said, I want a letter signed by the state and the guardianship that John Taylor Gatto's file is closed for adult protective services and that you cannot reopen it. And I'm thinking when she's telling them that, I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. They're like, we'll do a conference call next Monday. And they did. And the paperwork came through and they never touched them again or tried to, because they're out there jacking people. They don't want people scrutinizing their operations. Okay. That group, I think it was called JANSA, JANSA. They had hundreds of other people that they were jacking. They didn't want this one guy who's a world-renowned author that they just happened to get like on their list. It didn't have a lot of assets to get anyway. But like being the porcupine and not being a predator, but being a porcupine and making them spit you out is the name of the game, because you can't prevent them from doing what they do. They exist and they're going to continue doing that. The best you can do is let other people know what's going on and set a precedent so it doesn't happen to you again.
That's right. And that's what we're hoping to do. And if we can be of assistance to anybody else going through the same thing, I certainly will.
Well, where can people keep up with your story, Kevin?
They can find out about us. We are on all the socials, of course, YouTube, practically every one of our Sunday presentations or interviews or whatever we're doing is on our YouTube channel, The Mystics of Texas, which is our nickname. And you can find out a lot there because we talk about it a lot. And of course, mysticsofTexas.com and of course, Rumble, all of them. You can find us anywhere.
Well, I appreciate you carving out a little time to share these experiences, because if you keep it to yourself, it's just going to happen to more and more people. And then someone finds out later and does something about it. By you speaking up and having the courage and bravery to bring this to the attention of others, I think it gives them a chance to defend their rights and also come to your aid, because I think it was Goethe who said, be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid. Something like that. All right. I want you to keep me updated. I know you will. And thank you for coming to Grand Theft World, for sharing your steps in the middle of the process. I know, but you've taken strong steps so far, and I'm looking forward to hearing what happens next.
I really appreciate you having me on. It means a lot to me, and thanks again.